Hello, this is Ellen Marie Forsberg from NORSUS, Norwegian Institute for Sustainability Research, with Robert Smith from the University of Edinburgh. We are giving this webinar for applicants and evaluators to the RRI on Materials Research, mRNet. And we will specifically talk about responsible research and innovation, RRI, and how it can be included into proposals and how it will be evaluated. So, what is responsible research and innovation? It's about doing the right science right. And it's included into mRNet and also other RNet programs because funders believe it's important to make sure that taxpayers' money are going into research and innovation that actually benefits society and does no significant harm. It involves engagement of publics and societal stakeholders because science communities alone should not decide what is good for society or what is acceptable harm. So the social responsibility of science involves reflecting on the potential directions of research being undertaken, the purposes, and who might benefit and who might experience new risks from new research and inventions. It involves reflecting on how the potential social, environmental, and ethical issues can be considered throughout the science and innovation process, and how stakeholders and the public can be involved in the research. So RRI offers techniques and tools and frameworks to think about questions of social responsibility and ensure that scientists, funders, and technologies don't lose sight of the context in which they do science, technology, and innovation. mRNet's approach to RRI is based on similar approaches in the UK, in Norway, and in several other RRNets. It's aligned with the EU thinking, and it's aligned with state-of-the-art scientific contributions on RRI. And we will not go into any detail on that, but here you can see some examples from the European Commission and the EPSRC in the UK. So overall, RRI is about addressing societal needs, avoiding undesirable side effects, integrating responsibility into research and innovation practices in an inclusive and deliberative way. And it is assumed that responsibility cannot be outsourced, but also that collaboration is good. And we're talking about responsibility related to both social, environmental, ethical, or political issues. And you will recognize this in the call. It must be remembered that RRI must be tailored to the context. So RRI is not a straitjacket. And there will be differences in the national context or in the disciplinary context, in the scientific context, or in the funding context. And of course, from our context here, we are talking about mRNet and materials research. So if you look at the documentation on the website of mRNet, you will find that RRI is a horizontal issue in the program. It says that a goal of the program is to create socio-ecological benefits in the context of RRI. And it says that mRNet calls will address EU areas of socio-ecological relevance, illustrating the leveraging effects materials research and innovation have on areas that reflect meaningful societal needs. mRNet will develop responsible research and innovation processes to systematically address socio-ecological, ethical, and political dimensions of materials research, development, and use. So that's at the program level. And you will also find that in the specific calls and topic descriptions. So this is from the call now in 2024. And there you can see that there is, for every topic, there is a cross-cutting sustainability and RRI requirement. So it says that mERNet requires that all proposers explain how their projects demonstrate a commitment to RRI by investigating and addressing the environmental, social, ethical, political, or cultural dimensions of the proposed research. And they have the following bullet points that should be assessed in the proposals. And they are about resources, the use of resources, for instance, the use of critical raw materials, energy and water. It's about the production process that is being studied in the project, like toxic elements or substances of concern. It's about the use phase and the sustainability of the conditions under which a material can be used. The end-of-life issues like circularity, and also involvement of relevant societal stakeholders as appropriate. And it says that potential trade-offs between sustainability burdens and benefits should be described, and that the proposal should include an activity where relevant aspects are further investigated. In addition to this general cross-cutting issue, you can find in some of the subtopics a specific call for RRI under the topic description, and in this case, the technical content and scope section. So here you can see by the arrow that it is said that sustainable advanced materials development with scientific, societal, and economic impact should engage with aspects such as circularity, end-of-life treatment, recyclability, LCA, techno-economic assessment, and RRI. So read the topic description carefully and see what specific RRI requirements you find there. To help you develop a good RRI part of your proposal, guidelines have been developed. And here you just see some screenshots from the guidelines, which you find on the internet pages of mERNet. And I will not go through everything here, it's too much to read, but you should have a look at what is the full document online. I would just now like to emphasize a few things, namely that when you do it in practice, when you write your proposal, when you include RRI into your proposal, that can be done by addressing environmental impacts and sustainable solutions, for instance, by doing a LCA or a ecotoxicology studies or other designs. You can include RRI by involving relevant stakeholders, by including expertise beyond the natural and physical sciences. And what expertise is needed will differ, but it can be lawyers, it can be social scientists, philosophers, ethicists, to provide anticipatory and reflective methodologies. Including RRI can mean to create good deliberative spaces in your consortium at your meetings. And it can include considering ethical impacts of the research methods, and some are, of course, legally mandated, like animal welfare, data protection, etc. And there can be issues related to safety and security, dual use, etc. And of course, this has to be adapted to your project, because materials science projects are diverse. So you have to find out and discuss with your partners in the proposal what RRI topics are most important for your proposal. Now, there are some environmental and sustainability topics that are applicable for most materials research. But in particular, how can we avoid that new materials technologies create new environmental health or societal uncertainties? And it's about reducing the generation of waste. It's about the sustainability of the actual research process. It's about potential changes to value chains and how that affects different social groups, and for how it can be useful for stakeholders. So RRI can also help ensure stakeholder knowledge informs the research process. So those are quite generic issues for materials research. But as I said, materials science is diverse, and the RRI approach must be adapted to that. So, and for instance, some will be at a more exploratory and foundational level, which will require a different and perhaps more exploratory approach to then apply the higher TRL research. Scenarios can, for example, be a method to use when at the very early stage. And disruptive path-breaking research may require a more substantive approach to RRI than more incremental research. I have just now mentioned a few topics to consider, and I just want to say that there are many different sources for further information and examples online. And if you look at the guidelines that document that is posted on the mRNet web pages, you can find that you can click the links to these different online resources. So that was that for me, and now Rob will take over, please.
If I can find it. There we go. Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the evaluators are going to be looking for, and I'll give a couple of examples of approaches that you might take within projects that are particularly, I think, effective, and those are taken from previous mRNet calls. So as you'll see in the call documents, responsible research and innovation is evaluated in several places in the proposals. So under the excellence criteria, under the impact criteria, and although it's not talked about, it is something that will be looked at in implementation. So the first message is to think about responsible innovation as something which is equivalent to the other parts of the scientific proposal. So all the questions that evaluators would be asking of the kind of technical parts of your project regarding implementation are also questions that they will be asking regarding responsible research and innovation. So have you adequately resourced things? Is it clear what you're going to actually be doing within the work plan, etc., things like this. One point to note here is that there's also reference to ethical issues within mRNet. These are actually slightly different to responsible research and innovation in this context. Don't kind of, when you're thinking about your approach to responsible innovation, don't assume that you can kind of just address everything in the kind of ethical issues approach. We are actually looking for something kind of specific and that goes beyond these kind of requests. In the guidance within the European Commission documents, it's really important to note that when you're being evaluated, an evaluator is not going to mark you down for the same thing in different ways. So that means that under these criteria, people are actually looking for different things. So under the excellence criteria, the kinds of questions that people will be asking and looking for are things like, is the method clear? Is the approach that people are taking to responsible research and innovation specific to the project, and is it appropriate? Is it proportionate for the kinds of things that the applicants are proposing to do? In the impact section, people will be looking for things like, is the consideration of the relevant impacts, so environmental, social impacts, are they kind of very clearly considered? Are the statements that the applicants make within the proposal things that kind of hold water, that are kind of clearly evidenced and that make sense in this kind of context. And then, yeah, in implementation, people will be asking, is it clear what you're actually going to be doing? Is the right expertise there within the consortium and other resources there to do it? There are different approaches you can take to responsible research and innovation. In general, there tend to be two different styles of project that we see. And the first one is an approach which kind of tries to make the technology or the science itself inherently responsible or sustainable. So this will be, making design decisions about your technology to ensure that it is thinking about the potential consequences and impacts as you're going, and to try and come out with something which is really carefully thought through. The other approach is to be, I suppose, kind of quite active about trying to bring in new knowledge or new perspectives into the project to try and work through some of the issues. So to maybe not be quite clear about what it is that the kind of consequences will be, but to kind of show that you're really taking it seriously. Often this approach includes a specific work package associated with it. Both of these approaches are okay. As Ellen Marie said, material science is really diverse, and the M-IRINET's kind of funding structure is also very diverse. So the program is happy to work with what you're able to achieve within your kind of particular funding system. And both of these approaches can be good, and both of them can be bad. I've seen lots of examples of good and bad approaches in these two kind of categories. That said, the second approach is often, in some ways, easier to score highly because it often requires a work package, which means that then it requires people and requires money and things like this. And so it's much easier to see that there are kind of clear objectives, clear resources allocated to it, clear expertise, and the work is often more ambitious, I think, in some ways than the first style. As a reviewer, I think the general kinds of things that I personally would be looking for, and that the reviewers of the M-IRINET proposals would be looking for, are kind of the answers to these questions. So, in general, we'll be saying, what are people actually saying they're going to do? So rather than saying that their project is important or that the responsibility has been taken seriously, is there actually something that's going to happen? Is it clear that there's been some substantive thought that's gone into the proposal and into the responsibility and sustainability dimensions? It's completely fine to show you're working in this. We don't necessarily want projects where all of the answers have been found. I think it's fine to show trade-offs and be clear about those. Is something going to happen as a result of this work? What will the contribution of the RRI work be for the field more broadly? And then also, do I buy the claims, basically? So is it evidenced? Are the claims about sustainability and responsible innovation very kind of well referenced? Are they specific to the project, or are they kind of more general, kind of boilerplate text? And so to make this a little bit more concrete, I have two different good examples, I suppose, of projects that have been submitted as part of M-IRINET. They fall into these different categories. So one is more about trying to make the process itself responsible and sustainable, and the second is more a kind of thinking through project. And I'll just run through some of the things that they do. So the first one is a copper ceramic composites project. It wanted to inject ceramic into copper to improve conductivity. And in terms of the kind of the objectives and the RRI summary that they talked about right at the start of the proposal, they made it clear that they wanted to really understand and assess the characteristics of the material that they were making. When they were talking about social and environmental impacts, were very specific about the impacts and goals. So there weren't big sweeping statements about the importance of the project, but they were kind of very focused on the specifics of the kinds of things that they were working on. They demonstrated kind of life cycle thinking. So they thought about the characteristics and the issues associated with the material right from the design phase through to end of life and recyclability. And really importantly, they acknowledged the trade-offs. So they were really open about the fact that that sustainability is not something which is kind of a binary. It's like it is sustainable or it's not, but there are lots of dilemmas and trade-offs that they'll have to manage, and they showed that they were committed to thinking about how to deal with those. In the work plan, they were clear about how they would begin to do that kind of work. The second project aimed to improve the production of hydrogen through material science, and this was, I think, different in that it had a very specific work package associated it for responsible research and innovation. That work package had really clear defined objectives, key performance indicators associated with it, and really importantly, it aimed, one of its objectives was to push responsible research and innovation beyond the state of the art, so to make contributions to sustainability science and RRI itself. So RRI in this situation was treated as equivalent to the other parts of the project, and that's really, really good. They were really clear about acknowledging trade-offs as well, and they specifically set up the RRI work package as a way of thinking about, of forcing the other members and parts of the team to think critically about what they were doing. So their job was to be critical, be a critical friend of the project or to the project. And then the work plan was very clear. So it was clear that they were using techno-economic assessment, life cycle assessment. There was a dedicated work package with resources, people, and time. So this is something that I would be rewarding as a reviewer. So in general, the things to watch out for when you're putting these projects together are things like just conflating responsible research and innovation and outreach. This is something that is quite commonly done. And it's something that you won't be rewarded for. So be clear, remember that responsible research and innovation is about establishing a two-way dialogue between your project and the stakeholders that are relevant to it. It's not just about going out and telling people why your project is great. Responsible research and innovation is really important to developing new products that address real needs, but it's not necessarily about kind of making commercialization kind of easier and faster and more efficient. So although it's really relevant to commercialization and these kind of business and product development, it's something which is slightly distinct from it. I've said right at the start that there are questions around research ethics and research integrity that you'll be asked for. Remember that responsible research and innovation is something kind of distinct that goes beyond this. And then also remember that this is not about increasing public acceptance necessarily. So again, acceptance and support is really important for your science and for material science more broadly. But responsible research and innovation might help people to understand what it is that you're doing, and for you to understand the members of the public's kind of perspectives on your project. But this is mostly, again, about establishing a dialogue rather than assuming that by generating knowledge, you're going to generate acceptance. And then just some tips, I suppose, to finish with. So if you're in doubt of what to do and how to kind of go about developing this, the best projects that we've seen include RRI-specific expertise. That could be social scientists, bioethicists, lawyers, sustainability scientists, but it could also be scientists, people, members of your team that have been trained and that have kind of understanding of what it is that the issues are that are important to your project. They're really often adequately resourced. I know that budgets can be tight, but showing that you've put money into this is something which will be rewarded. Think about allocating the work in the same way as the rest of your project. Think about it as something which contributes to the project rather than kind of takes away from it, I suppose. Be clear about how this is very specific and integrated into the project. So do you have advisory boards? Do you have time within your project meetings? Do you have opportunities to stop and think about design criteria and choices that responsible innovation can inform? Be very clear about the integration. And then the very best projects that we see are not ones which are just contributing to material science, but contribute to the field of responsible research and innovation itself. So um, if you're trying to think about how to kind of do this in the best way possible, be really clear about how you're pushing the state of the art for responsible research and innovation as a field of study. That's all that I want to say. And apart from, if you have any more questions, feel free to get in touch. Cecilia Mattison at the Norwegian Research Council is your first point of contact, but Ellen Marie and I are very happy to take informal questions as well if you have any question, anything you want to ask that Cecilia can't answer. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you. Good luck.